The May 15th meeting of the Finance Committee of the Joint Water and Sewer Commission for Brunswick-Glynn County is now open. We're still waiting on one committee member to arrive. He's apparently out in the parking lot. As soon as he comes in, we'll have all three committee members here. That's Commissioner Stevens. And we can start with a public comment period. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, sir. You have Mr. Charlie Lee for public comment. Mr. Lee, if you'll step to the podium on the right-hand side, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Pastor Charlie Lee, and I lived in Brunswick now for 53 years, and 10 kids born here and raised here, and they're not like me. All of them has got an education. Some played pro football. I went through really an embarrassing, a hurtful time with joint sewer and water. I mean, it is sad the way the public perceive joint sewer and water. I had a water leak some time ago, and I went to Mr. Swan, and we came to an agreement about my water bill. They were supposed to give me an adjustment on it. I never got the adjustment. And I signed an agreement to pay $123 a month at that time. I signed a deal in 15 or 16. And I paid that bill up until year before last. And I got stage 4 cancer, and I came to Mr. Swan. I met this gentleman. I came to talk with him about it before. I can't remember his name right now. But, and I said, Mr. Swan, I got medicine now I have to pay $1,500 a month for out of my pocket because my insurance is not going to pay it. And he said, okay, Mr. Lee, can you pay the connection fee, which is $60? I paid that connection fee for a year and a half. And then I also in that meeting told Mr. Swan, I had a tree leaning over towards my house that I was afraid was going to fall on my house one day. Well, and I told Mayor Harvey, he knows about it, and Roosevelt Harris, and also James Brooks talked to him about that tree. He told me he would get it taken care of. So when Matthew came, the storm came right across my kids' trampoline, my grandkids, and crossed my house and did $8,000 worth of damage to my house, which I don't have insurance on my house to pay for it because I'm trying to pay to live with this cancer. And so I filed a claim with joint sewer and water for the damage that was done to my house. They sent the colonel out, they sent the purchasing neighbor sent her out, and 2 other gentlemen. They went all through everything, took all kind of pictures and everything, and then they sent an adjuster out, she told me it was. He looked at it, he done the same thing. Anyway, they wouldn't pay the claim. So I filed a claim against joint sewer and water in small claim court 2 weeks ago. Of course, they ruled against me. They asked for, it's amazing, my bill was about, my water bill with them was about $8,000, but they asked for $10,000 in an attorney's fee. I thought joint sewer and water was a public servant, not somebody that punishes somebody. But anyway, in 17, in September, they turned my water off. Like I said, stage 4 cancer. They turned my water off. I went in to talk to Mr. Hobbs about getting my water turned back on because I needed it. And so, and I was talking with Mr. Hobbs, and Mr. Jumpkin came in, just came in the office, and Frank was kept talking to me about this bill, and they couldn't get the water turned back on. And Mr. Jumpkin said to me, Mr. Lee, you people need to pay your bills. I'm going to teach you a lesson. And for 5 months, he taught me a lesson. I had to drive to McIntosh County, me and my wife, sometimes twice a day for water. Mayor Harvey talked to him and made an agreement with them to turn my water back on. I had to pay $750 down in January, and I paid $210 a month since then until current. Well, when I signed the agreement, it wasn't anything about no 1.5% interest. I didn't sign on it. They let me pay the $210 for 3 months, and then the 4th month popped up $110, $120 interest per month. That is ludicrous. How can I ever get my bill reduced by someone charging me interest. And I looked up, I'm not a smart man, not an educated man, but I looked up the code in Georgia. It's not legal for them to charge you interest. They can charge a late fee, but not interest. And so the judge ruled against me, and he ruled that they would, I would have to pay them, which I already filed. That's the attorney right there, the young gentleman. I hope he's real sharp, because I'm going to take him to every court in the land until this is rectified. I already had to file a case in Superior Court again for that thing. And I'm going to file one in federal court unless this is resolved. For the comments Mr. Jumpkin made toward me, I'm going to teach you people a lesson. Well, and now they're finna turn my water off again, but I've paid the $210 for 60 months. Open to prayer, I've not missed a payment, but now they're going to turn my water off. And I think that's appalling. I've been in this town for 50-some odd years. Judge Alamo taught me to fight to the end when somebody do me wrong, and some people lied in court to the judge. That's okay, but not in front of a jury. I'm going to take this in front of a 12-man jury or whatever, however, you know what I mean. And I'm asking y'all to not let these people turn my water off. I made an agreement to pay $210 a month. I've been paying $210 a month for 16 months. I've not missed a payment. And Mr. Harvey, I tell you that, he talked with Jumpkin and got him turned back on. So I ask you all to help me rectify this. This has been done wrong. I worked in one job for 33 years in this town that Georgia Limo got me. I worked on it for 33 years. I ran a $50 million dealership before I retired, and I've done right, and they won this time, but they got to beat me again because I've taken every court in the land until it's rectified. I know how to do it, and I have the means to do it with. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Is your water turned on now?
It's on now, but they sent a statement that they're going to turn my water off. All right, and judge ruled against them, and he asked in the thing that they could turn my water off. He told the judge that, well, joint sewer and water can turn his water off. That's what the gentleman told the judge, and so the judge ruled in their behalf. So therefore, I guess so they're going to follow through with it. And I'm here to ask you not to let them do that. Continue to pay this $210 a month that I'm paying, which is a lot of money for water, until this is resolved. I know it's a double standard here at Joint Sewer and Water. I know a doctor, Dr. Nelson, my friend of mine that killed himself. He owed $50,000, he told me, to Joint Sewer and Water, and he was paying $25 a month, but they didn't turn his water off. And I had a bad leak, and it took us a half a day to bust the concrete up, fix the leak, and they made us get two notarized plumber statement to bring here, and they were going to give me an adjustment. I never got that, and the water still kept running. They came out, and they had to tell that to the judge. They changed 2 water meters at my house after I fixed the leak. Why did they change the water meters?
Did you have some comments?
I was going to comment, we could talk about this in executive session if you'd like to, or I can tell you what the status of it is right here.
Do we need an executive
I
session?
can tell you I can tell you that the judge did rule in our favor, is it either earlier this week or late last week, Mr. Lee has 30 days to appeal that ruling. Well, both parties actually have 30 days to appeal that ruling to the Superior Court. We informed the judge, though, if the judgment was in our favor and the issue was not appealed, then it was JWSC's intent to terminate service if the judgment is not paid within that 30 days.
I see just one comment, sir. Some evidence was entered into that case that won't be in Superior Court because the deposition that Swan gave was by telephone. He did not appear. He couldn't stand face to face and ask a question. And that is really, it was inadmissible in court. And the judge, in this court, he permitted it. So the whole thing is just a real big sham. Is all it is. And they're taking it personal, and I'm taking it personal. You want to fight me? Get ready. I'm a fighter. I've done some things for my country that I can't talk to you all about here. And it's sad that I have somebody like me that done so much to be put in this situation. And I'm going to fight it till the end. I want you gentlemen to know that. You want to fight me? Come on, I'll fight you.
So I just want to say Mr. Lee made reference that about his water not being cut off. It hasn't been cut off because of the issue. That's the reason why it hadn't been cut off until it get resolved. Talking to our legal counsel, that's one of the reasons. It's not the fact that due to any other thing. It's the fact that once we get this thing resolved, then the policy kicks in. So it hasn't been turned off because of that reason.
Because of the cutoff policy.
Yeah, what hasn't been
Because
cut
of
off?
our
Because-
resolving our cutoff policy.
Yes. Also, because
Because
of
of pending litigation.
And
because of litigation. That's the reason why.
Fine.
Yes.
I just,
Not because I intervened or whatever like that. It was because of we having pending litigation. That's why until that
That's right.
is solved.
And at this point, it won't be cut off during the 30-day period.
yes, sir, although we certainly have the right to.
And our plan is to not during the 30-day period? Is that correct?
Right now,
Yes,
during the 30-day period, we do not intend to cut the water off.
Well, could I ask a question? What purpose would it serve to hurt me? I'm 72 years old. I'm not a bum. And like I said, I'm paying these people $210 a month. That's a lot of money. What purpose would it serve? Like I said, I've had stage 4 cancer. I'm not asking for no pity now. I never had that, asked that, but I'm asking to do right. What purpose would it serve to hurt me? And I'm paying my money. For 16 months, I've been paying the $210, and there's $120 interest they charge me each on the balances, not letting it come down. So what purpose would it serve to hurt me and my family? They hurt me for 5 months. I had to drive to Magnus County sometime twice a day. What purpose would it serve? I'm a citizen. And I'm not the only one. You can go through this whole neighborhood. Joint shooting water has hurt many people, and I'm going to do what it takes to stop it.
Mr. Lee, I don't think no one's trying to personally hurt you. I think as we work through this process, let us try to work through this process, and then we talk sensibly and get things ironed out.
Yes,
I don't
sir.
think as we air out the differences right here, it's not going to solve anything right now at the moment.
Yes, sir.
So give us some time. You well within your right to do what you need to do to make yourself feel whole. We understand that. But this organization would like to go through the process that we go through before we
Yes, sir.
do anything.
And I appreciate it. And thank y'all so much for hearing me. I really appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I think we have some cutoff on the agenda today, and there's some information that you were going to share that may be involved with this issue.
Yes, sir.
Not particularly with this issue, but in general. Okay. Let's move on to approvals.
I move to accept the minutes of April 17th.
I guess I have to second it. All in favor? Motion on the table. Minutes are approved. Item 2 is appointment of an auditor. John, you wanted to tell us about that?
Yes, Commissioners, there's a memorandum in your packages to appoint Malden and Jenkins to perform our financial audit for the year ending June 30th, 2019. Malden and Jenkins was selected by competitive bid in the beginning of 2018 to do our audit last year. It was an initial year plus 3 and 2 additional years after that. Each of those years was priced at $19,900. And this resolution asks you to appoint them again this year to perform the financial audit for the JWSC.
So we have an agreed to amount
Yes, sir.
of $19,900. I'm wondering is there any sort of schedule of services defined for what would be performed in that audit? Or is it kind of open, we'll perform an audit?
They will perform an audit based on their evaluation of our internal controls and an assessment of risks involved in the audit and schedule their work to give them reasonable satisfaction that our financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects.
I mean, I don't have an issue with Malden and Jenkins doing the audit. I don't have any kind of issue with that, and the negotiated amount is likely appropriate. The thing I'd like to see is that that in their schedule of services for the contract, that there be some detail on the purpose of the audit and what we want them to look at, so that they don't just choose and give us an audit back and then we review it. I'd like to see some meat in that as what they're gonna look for.
Well, the normal practice is that that the governing body would form an audit committee the auditors actually work for the commission, the Board of Commissioners, as does the attorney. They work for you, so you could certainly form an audit committee, meet with the auditors, and discuss with them particular areas that you would like them to focus in.
Yeah, we did that last year.
Yeah, did the RFP lay out our expected services? Since we bid this,
Yeah, I mean, it was a year ago, I'd have to
It
get a
was-
copy to share.
To the best of my recollection, was to perform the audit, the financial audit, in compliance with AICPA and other accounting regulations or rules that govern how certified public accountants work.
Is this time sensitive?
Yes, sir, it is. June 30th, the last day of the year, the auditors would have to come to perform a test count of inventories at that time so that they can verify that. There's also some preliminary work that needs to be done prior to the fiscal year end, such as preparing bank confirmations, lists of vendors or customers that they want to confirm balances on, and so on. There's a good deal of work that's performed before July 1st.
So we have to have them on board to comply by June 30th?
It would have to be by June 30th, yes.
June 30th.
he should have brought this forward probably in March. Because we could have made a determination not to reemploy these people, and we could have gone back out on a bid, correct?
Yes, sir.
I think, I'm impressed with auditors right now.
I would like to see a schedule of the services that were included in the bid, in the RFP.
Why don't we have that for tomorrow? And we move this forward to the full commission and look at it again tomorrow.
Okay. I'll second that. All in favor? So we'll move this forward to the full commission tomorrow. Take a look at the schedule of services that they're gonna provide, and then re-engage this discussion at that time.
I'd also request that you provide a copy of the last audit to remind the commissioners of what was performed last year. Okay.
Item 3, banking resolution signature cards. John?
Yes, sir. With the departure of Mr. Junkin, we need to have his name removed as an authorized user or an authorized signatory on our bank accounts. We're also asking that Andrew Burrows be added to that authorized signatories for checks that we require 2 signatures on checks that are $5,000 or over. Both LaDonna Roberts and I have signature authority, but I would rather not have both of us being both in the finance department sign unless absolutely necessary, and give the commission notice if we do need to sign those checks. Having Andrew be able to sign those checks would alleviate that. It's not really a conflict, but it would be much better if he actually signed them rather than the 2 of us.
So does this require a modification to a policy?
No,
Or
sir.
just an action by the,
It's just an action
of the
by the
board.
commission to authorize, it actually authorizes the chairman, vice chairman, Mr. Burrows, myself, and Ms. Roberts to sign checks on behalf of the JWSC.
I'm in agreement
And
with
there are-
that.
There are a number of banking resolutions that require those signatures on them, and
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Finance Committee of Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water Sewer Commission recommend to the JWSC Commission the approval of the addition of the acting executive director as an authorized signatory on the bank accounts of JWSC, and that the chairman, vice chairman, acting executive director, and director of finance be authorized to execute the necessary banking resolutions and signature cards with BB&T Bank.
Second.
We've got a second. All in, motion on the table, all in favor, signify by right hand. Motion passes. We'll move that forward to the main commission, full commission. So we're moving on to discussion items.
Commissioner Copeland, with your approval, Ms. Crosby's here to discuss the inventory, and rather than having her sit through the rest of the discussion, if we can move that to the top of the discussion so that she can get back to work when that discussion is over with. I'd like to sort of jump the queue there a little bit.
Do we need to have any kind of motion to change the agenda?
Yes, sir.
I so move, change the agenda and move the inventory to the number one item under discussion.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. We now have item number 6, move to item 1, inventory.
So one of the things every year for inventory, which is part of the audit process, is we do a preparation for those counts. At the year end, the auditor will come in and take a sample of our inventory items and perform some stock check counts for us. If you guys will recall, in our audit from last year, there were some notes that we probably needed to look at those policies and procedures and also some discrepancies in those items. Earlier this year, we reassigned the inventory responsibility duties at the system company maintenance location, not our water distribution location, to myself. So responsible for those inventories and that. So in preparation for this year's audit, what we always look at is obviously individual unit variances, also the internal controls on cycle counts and things of that nature. And I think this was mentioned in the previous meeting that was, we were doing the initial counts and stuff. We're still seeing some variances. We've been working through some changes in our process, a little more in segregation of the duties of some of the staff there. We're making some changes in our receiving policies, et cetera. But it looks like we're gonna have a pretty significant variance that we're probably gonna need to book prior to the end of the year. Like I said, I think this was mentioned in previous meeting, and so we just wanted to put it on as a discussion item today so that, you know, in preparation for year-end closeout, it's not something that sneaks up on us and we're not aware of. We don't have the final numbers of what the variances are. At that location, we have approximately 1,700 items. But if you look at the top 300 items in value, it constitutes about 88% of the overall dollar value of the inventory. So what we've chosen to do is focus on those top 300 items and verifying those counts against what we show in our city work system for those. So initially, we're looking like we've got some significant variances, particularly some of the items that aren't within the four walls of the warehouse. So you can imagine some of the items we have are pretty large. They won't fit in the warehouse. We're talking concrete structures, things that support manhole rehab, some of our larger pumps, and things of that nature. So we're just working through those items, wanted to come and talk to you guys about that and let you know that we're probably coming forward with a variance amount to review at a future date. But we are putting some stuff in place with changes in policies and internal controls. John's been doing some work on those financial policies, and then we'll actually have the procedures that'll change. There'll probably be some additional duties or a little bit of rewriting on some of the job descriptions of the individuals that are involved in inventory. We may get some new staff that are already here working in procurement, but they'll actually have some inventory responsibilities that they don't currently have. there may be some internal controls that we bring them in for certain tasks, so that we can get a segregation, a better segregation of duties. Which, if you'll also recall, that's one of the things in our audits, that we've had note of in the past. So, the good news is we're on top of trying to get these variances in line. Obviously, it's not great news that we have variances, but we are working through those processes. On the water distribution side, which is the warehouse that's on St. Simon's Island on Carrington, we're looking really good on those counts. It's a much smaller inventory there, a lot less items, and a little bit more internal controls as far as the individuals that are involved in inventory disbursements there. So we're seeing real positive numbers there, and those look in balance. So if you're looking on the balance sheet and you see the inventory line item, that's a combined of both locations, the water distribution and the systems pumping and maintenance location. So we don't actually pull those out separately, but I have those numbers that we can look at. And so when we come back, we'll tell you what the variances are by location, because we do handle the inventory differently, and the amount of staff that we have at each location is different as well. So that can explain some of the control issues that we're having, that we're seeing. But know that we are making those procedural changes and trying to add some additional internal controls, so that these variances will be, hopefully non-existent, but definitely smaller and caught sooner than they maybe have been before.
Are you prepared to share any numbers at this time, other than,
Right now, in the initial thing, like I said, so bear in mind, we're looking at the top 300 items out of 1,700. We believe out of those 1,700, there's a little over 200 that we could probably go ahead and take off the book as active items because they look obsolete and they don't have any values with those. And that'd be, less items that we have to take into the accounts going forward because they're not of value to us. But we are a couple $100,000, it looks like, off. And like I said, we haven't counted some of our larger items with the pipe. So there's north of $100,000 in that we've yet to even look at in that top 100. So the numbers are pretty significant, and obviously we've met with our operations staff and our inventory staff, and we have a lot of hands involved in trying to, the items we can't find or match or where the count's off, did it get put in field, is it installed, maybe it's in an alternative location that somebody's not aware of, that kind of thing. So we're doing everything we can to get those numbers reconciled, as close as possible prior to the inventory audit coming at the end of the fiscal year, which
So
will be June 30th.
at this point, you're identifying if the inventory exists, physically still exists,
Right.
it's on the books, you're looking to see what is there, and you're comparing the two, and at the moment, you're seeing a couple of $100,000 difference, variance,
Yes.
where we're short.
Yes.
100,000 of that was in pipe.
Yes.
And total inventory, total inventory is,
At that location.
I mean, on my balance sheet that I'm looking at here,
On the
it
balance
looks
sheet,
like
it's probably
1.6.
about 1.6.
1.6.
Right, so at the Academy Creek location, we're talking about 1.1 million, and then the other $500,000 would be at the St. Simon's location. That's what I was referencing before. On the balance sheet, the two inventories are combined, but the breakout between those is about 1.1 at the Newcastle Street location.
So of the 1.6 million, 1.1 would be what we're speaking of now,
That's what we're working through.
and you're thinking we're about 200,000 short on that number,
On what we've been able to verify in the top
300.
Right. So there's an additional $100,000 of pipe in that 300 that we haven't counted. So that 2 is really like 3 because that 1 we haven't touched, because the majority of that pipe is not at the Newcastle Street location. It's stored at our pump station 4039 laydown yard.
So you believe our inventory in that location is overstated by 30%?
At this point, yes.
And in all likelihood, some of the way the things are listed in inventory is not ultimately descriptive, and that's something we're going through as well. So getting the operations staff that knows what that's supposed to be involved with the inventory staff, we're hopeful we'll be able to track down a large portion of the difference. If there is a difference, it's almost assuredly pipe and stuff that we put in the ground that just never got booked out of inventory. So it's not like we lost inventory, it's that the record keeping wasn't the greatest, and Ms. Crosby's been doing the inventory for us for about a year now, and it's been a tedious process, but, you know, while the news doesn't sound fantastic on that front, she's putting policies in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. And moving forward, I think that's what we need to focus on, is retraining the folks on how to do it, providing people with more big picture ideas of how does John's finance stuff work with Pam's inventory and the budgets of the operating groups, and make sure everybody understands that what one group does affects everybody else. So we're gonna do some, I won't say remedial training, we're gonna do some probably initial training on some of this stuff with a lot of the people that are involved with purchases. So we're moving forward with those hopefully in the next few weeks.
And one of the things too, when we come back and talk about the variance, I'll have a flow chart that kind of
Right.
shows you all the steps that are involved, because it's more than just the ordering the items in, receiving them in, and signing them out to the field. There's a whole nother process that has to happen for the reporting to work in both our city work system, which is what we're using for work order management, and our enterprise system, which is the financial management. So that whole journal entry piece is also gonna be examined as part of that process as well. So,
Okay, and
If I may
also
offer a
bear in
comment.
mind that some of this variance can be caused by price differences between what the inventory is valued at when we do the physical counts and the extensions, and what the goods actually cost us, because there may not have updated the price on it, the unit price on a good, so there could be some dollar value that's associated with that computation as well.
And
It's
so-
not just physical count of that.
and I would like to make that point, is that it's not just one issue that we've got, you know, there's a multitude of things that are involved in inventory management. So some of it is the physical control, some of it is the record keeping and the actual financial booking. Some of it's data entry issues. We had a little bit of a hiccup with our city work software when that was implemented, and we found some stuff and identified some stuff we can take right off the top. So when I give the report on what the number really is, when we come back in a few weeks and tell you that, I'll kind of explain to y'all some of those circumstances of what's got us there, but then we'll also talk to you about the measures of how we're gonna address those, you know, going forward, and what the additional controls, information will be.
So you'll be able to divide it up between the financial impact as well as the unit count,
Yes.
and we can see the differences. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may make a comment, as I understand it, kind of summarize it for myself, is, number one, we have some very specialized equipment, and it's not something that can be used just about any place. It's really designed for water and sewer systems. So the higher likelihood is just our diligence whenever we've had to respond to an emergency or something, we didn't do our book work and charge it to the right project. But probably, I'm thinking your larger items, particularly the ones higher value, 100-plus value, the 100 top, are going to be the high-value items that went into a capital project. And what you're telling me, Pam, is that we're going to improve our processes and our diligence to better track what we're doing so that we don't have these exceptions. And perhaps if we do a cycle count, at least on a quarterly basis, that will be heading off any significant issues like you're bringing on. Okay. Well, I've been engaged in material management before, and I understand the tribulations that you're experiencing trying to move from a more of a manual system to one that's more process-driven. So, thank you.
When do you expect to bring a report back to us?
I would think I'll have it for your next finance committee meeting.
In another month?
We absolutely need to get this taken care of before the end of the year
End of the fiscal year.
because of the audit and the fact that it was mentioned in the audit last year. We want to get this taken care of before the next audit, and that goes away on our list.
Because think about it, the plan and the changes in procedures, that'll be what we're doing to kind of correct that. Because that's just as much what they'll want to see in the audit as verifying your numbers right. They want to make sure that you've got processes in place to ensure that your number stays right.
You know, I'd like to see that our exceptions we book in this fiscal year, not in the next one.
That is our goal.
Yeah.
So we don't
That's
start in
our
a
goal
hole.
since the beginning of this, so.
Okay, thank you.
But taking the financial piece out of it just for a second, I mean, during this, are we looking for gaps in our inventory? I mean, are we looking for things that we should have for emergencies on site that we might not?
That'll be kind of a next, phase of that. We'll also be looking for things that are obsolete that potentially, we could maybe either sell or scrap depending on what they are, that sort of thing. Because, you know, I think some of these things here, if you look at it, when they were added to inventory, it was because something major had happened and we want to be prepared the next time it happens. It may have been a long time and maybe that problem's never happened again. So one of the things you would think just our basic min, max, and last time used, some of that information is what we're trying to garner here to be able to make those decisions on what the right quantities to have going forward on.
You made reference to a large concrete structure, I think is the word you used. And when you said that, I'm sure it's probably not that, but when I said that, I'm thinking like, you know, some kind of box that you can lower down so people can hold dirt back safely or something. How do we delineate kind of the capital assets from a true inventory item? Something that's really more of a tool that we're using over and over that we depreciate versus something that's actually an inventory item that's gonna get consumed, for lack of a better term.
First of all, something like a box that you're talking about, and I'm not sure what you call them, but where all pipes come into, if that's being held for future use, the accounting rules are that it's not a depreciable asset until it's placed into service. So until that time, it's held in inventory.
And typically, things we buy with the operating budget stay in inventory until they're put into service. If it's bought with R&R funds or expansion funds, it doesn't go into inventory because it's bought directly and booked to that project.
I was picturing that more of almost like a tool that you use it for 3 months, pull it out, stick it back over here, and then when you need it again, use it again. More almost a tool than a inventory, so that's why I was
I think
asking.
she was actually talking about manhole risers, so
That's
Okay.
exactly what I'm talking
All right,
about.
never mind then.
we don't take those out of service.
Right.
Thank you for the update on inventory. Any additional comments?
Well, I just wanted to make one other comment. The PVC pipe that's out at 4039, is this still uncovered?
A great deal of it is still uncovered, and that's one of the things that, as part of this process, is to get all that PVC pipe undercover. Most likely would be relocated to the solids building, the compost building down at Academy Creek, and get that undercover down there. Because we don't have anywhere else big enough that's got a roof on it to put that much pipe in there. PVC doesn't like sunlight.
Item 2, customer deposit refunds. Tripp, was that yours?
Oh, yeah, you want me to talk about it? I was just really asking for kind of an update on where we're at. I mean, we talked, I believe it was even the last calendar year about, doing the customer depositing refunds for all the customers, and we kind of got to a point, my understanding at least, is where we were able to do that, but only with the residential accounts, and we were gonna have to do something different. I don't remember what that was in order to refund that on the commercial accounts. And then I was just kind of curious where we were with that, or we were still working on it, or we're still, I mean, ultimately, me personally, I think we should, once somebody's got a payment history that's strong and there's no really threat of them defaulting on their payment, commercial or residential, I think we ought to return their money.
We have returned several accounts on the residential side, their deposits. It's been a manual process. We do not currently have the ability to do that automated, so it's been somewhat tedious. The city and county ordinances technically do not allow for the refunding of commercial deposits. With that being said, the county is in the process of going through an ordinance rewrite, and we have a multitude of things we want to get adjusted, and this is one of the things that we're going to throw in there as part of that adjustment period, is to allow on the commercial side for the deposits to be returned. So
So they have to actually change their ordinance. We can't just put something in front of them and say, hey, vote to allow us to do that.
I mean, we can, but I think right now with the way they're rewriting their ordinances, I don't think they want to do pieces and they want to do it all at one time, just so they, take it at one cut instead of adjusting the adjusted.
Well, just educate me, why does their ordinance preclude us from being able to refund somebody?
Because their ordinances are technically what we operate under. It's kind of like, their ordinances state that if you're within 500 feet of a water and sewer line, you gotta be tied on. We have standards for design and, for construction, but they are the actual rules we have to work by. So, I mean,
Understanding the process that they're using to go through, this may be a long time coming.
Sure.
2 years, I believe, is what their time frame is.
Okay.
I, as a commissioner, would hope that you would pull together your staff's recommendations for ordinance changes and bring them before the commission so that we know what we're going forward with, or, so we come up with a list of
Sure.
ordinance changes that we want before we get to the point where they're asking and we haven't done anything.
absolutely, we'll have that for you. I won't say by next meeting, but we'll have that, we'll be working on that for you.
What about the city ordinances? They preclude us from returning in the city?
City and the county ordinances are the exact same.
Same thing.
Item 3, cutoff policy. Who owns this one?
I will take this one.
Okay.
As we know, we have had some significant cutoffs due to some large balances, and we've gotten that mostly from the cutoff perspective under control. We do not see near the volume of cutoffs that we did previously. In your packet, you'll see there is 2 flow charts. The first one is what the current policy is. Basically, if you'll follow the decision matrix there, you get a bill, and once you're over $99.99 past due, you are subject to be cut off. So 20 days after that bill you haven't paid us, you get cut off, and you're subject to a 1.5% late fee. And then is your next bill, are you paid your balance off? If the answer is no, you're gonna get cut off again. And somewhat in this endless cycle, and when you're on a payment plan, the late fees are charged on payment plans as well. So say someone has a $5,000 balance, they're getting the 1.5% added every single month, and it compounds on them, which we have discussed in here multiple times. That is actually part of the rate resolution that says that all past due balances get charged a 1.5% late fee. The rate resolution is something that is voted on by the commissioners. So what we brought today to discuss is, first of all, with the new rate resolution that goes into effect July 1, we would hope to put language in there that states that if you're on an active payment plan, you will no longer receive the late fees added to your account. As long as you're paying your bill, you will not get additional late fees added to your account, because on the payment plan, you've made arrangements to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. And as was indicated by Mr. Lee earlier, some of these unfortunate balances give us $100 to $150 late fees added each month. So it's very difficult for folks to dig out of that hole when you're getting $100 extra added to your bill in late fees. But ultimately, this is about helping our customers out and wanting to make sure that our customers meet us halfway and work out, because what we're trying to do, what we're proposing today is, starting July 1st with the rate resolution change, no more late fees being added. If you, as a customer that has a substantial balance and is on an active payment plan on July 1st, pay 6 consecutive months as required by the policy, by the payment arrangement. After 6 months, you come to us, we will actually take off all the accrued late fees that you've had during the thing. You will still be responsible for every gallon of water that went through your meter, but the late fees that have been added to your bill for our lack of cutting off and allowing these huge balances to accrue would be removed from your account at that time. If you're paying for 6 consecutive months, I think that's showing us that you want to pay your balance off. And if you want to pay your balance off, we want to help you get to that point. There's going to be some people that are, they're not going to make 6 consecutive payments, but we're willing to help you out if you're literally trying to help get this balance off. We somewhat help create this balance by not cutting you off and letting you not pay your bill for years, and then we started adding 1.5% per month and then compound it on you. And a lot of time, for some folks, the late fees are 3 times what their usage is.
So as it stands now, when there is a payment arrangement agreed to, the late fee is already built into that arrangement? every month
every month,
going forward.
going forward until the.
Additional
balance is
1.5 every month going forward is in that payment schedule.
zero. And it does compound, yes, sir.
Okay, and then what you're proposing is that you would still have that payment schedule negotiated, but at the end of 6 months, if the bill has been paid every month for 6 months, then you would retroactively remove those late fees?
Yes and no. The first thing would be on the July 1st rate resolution, we stop charging the late fees on those accounts. If you've got an active payment plan that you are in compliance with. So they would immediately see that reduction of that 1.5% would no longer be added. But starting July 1, if you pay for 6 months, the 1.5% that we've been adding to you during this time period, we'll take that off your bill. So all the accrued late fees prior to July 1 would be taken off the bill at that point.
So we're actually negotiating contracts now, payment schedules with built-in late fees every month,
That is
even
correct.
though they're paying per the schedule.
That is correct.
Well, and we've got just, I mean, compound interest from the last 5 years. I mean,
Right.
correct me if I misunderstood you, but I mean, some of these, I'm just making numbers up, just bear with me, making a nice round number. If somebody's got a $5,000 balance that goes back 3 years, it's very possible that over 3 years or 36 months, that the total cumulative water usage is $2,000, and everything else in that 5,000 is late fees, and then late fees for the late fee that was missed, and then late fee for the late fee that was missed. So I mean, what'd you say the percentage was?
For some folks, it could be 40–50% of their bill, and that's if you got a high water usage and a high bill. If you're a customer that's just had chronic non-payment issues in the past, and then we started shutting you off, and you're a low water user, you could have 3 times the amount of late fees as you do water usage.
And that's my heartburn with this whole thing, is
Yeah.
that we've, you know, like, we hadn't cut people off to the point that, you know, we allowed the late fees to accumulate. I see the late fees as for folks like myself who are getting mail in, that messes with your cash flow, and then next month I pay double. Well, it cost me 1.5%.
Right.
Of the bill, and 18%
Can,
interest.
can you bring actual numbers tomorrow?
We can bring examples. It's a manual process to go back through some of these accounts because there's been.
Well, these are accounts from the city and the county
Yes.
that we
would-
inherited,
We
correct?
would be basically going back, if you paid the 6 months in consecutively, we would be going back to the last time you had a zero balance
Uh-huh.
or since the start of the JWSC to write off the late fees.
I think this is gonna be I think it'd be great for, a show that we're trying to work with our community, basically. I know, someone said before, if we start getting some money, it'd be better than no money. But I think that, we showing and also giving them incentive to pay their bill, and we're trying to get them at a starting point where they can continue to pay their bill and not be saddled with, all these fees coming, and also we're trying to take it away. That gives them incentive for 6 months to at least pay that bill and keep paying that bill until we get it done. So I look at it as we had a strict cutoff policy that really affected a lot of folks. A lot of folks got caught up in that web, and now we're trying to rectify that and put everybody back on an even ground. And moving forward, people should be able to pay their bills. And the ones who fall out, they deserve. Well, I don't say deserve, but they have fallen out, and we will deal with them anyhow. But to try to get the majority of our people back on even ground.
I wish there was a way, and I'm not proposing this, I'm just thinking out loud here. I wish there was a way we could just go back to people who are, you know, these people who are 3 and 5 years in arrears, calculate it out, and say, this is how much water you used during that time. It's, you know, you owe us $5,000, but $3,500 of that's interest and late payments and interest and fees on top of fees. And then, but your actual consumption was $1,500. So we're gonna take that $1,500, we're gonna take and put you on a 24-month payment plan. For the next 24 months, we're gonna charge 1/24 of that $1,500 towards your actual usage. As long as you stay current on your actual usage, and that 1/24 of the actual usage or whatever it is, then, you know, we're good.
I think that's what it is.
That is exactly what's gonna happen.
Yes.
is- But to
After
do
they
that,
get 6 months,
to do that, you've got to, basically, we want the customer to show that they want to get that debt removed.
Right.
And I understand, and I see, I mean, I see where you're coming from with that. My only concern is some of these $5,000 payments, I mean, $5,000 arrears that they do have the interest on. I mean, some of them $250, $300 a month. I don't know if they can do it for 6 months even. I mean, if they can do it for 6 months, theoretically they can do it forever. They probably
Well, I see your
do it
point.
for 6 months.
Yeah, I see your point.
So I mean, if we went ahead and just said, you know what, we're just,
Okay, this is a JWSC policy, correct?
Yes.
And not affected by ordinance.
That's correct.
Now, on those $5,000 accounts, what you're suggesting is when they negotiate a payment plan, that schedule would
yes.
reduce that $5,000 amount by the late fees down to the actual,
Not until after 6 months.
well,
No,
the payment plan would be immediate.
Yes, the payment plan starting July 1 would no longer have the 1.5% added. So that late fee, $100 a month, goes away
Going forward.
going forward.
Right.
Will,
How about retroactive?
the proposal would be retroactive after 6 months of payment.
So the schedule would include, so a $250 payment that had $125 worth of interest and late fees in that payment would remain on that schedule for 6 months. And then after 6 months, the 125 would suddenly go to principal, and the future 250 would mostly be principal.
Almost entirely.
And, and the other thing is, it's really a waiver of a penalty. It's not a write-off of revenue, because we're, right, so what we're
Well-
wanting to collect is the revenue from the water consumption.
Well, any revenue from the actual bills and the late fees has already been recorded as revenue in the fiscal year that was billed. So it doesn't, the effect that it would have on the income and revenue statement for the JWSC would be an additional, effectively a bad debt write-off. But it's been recorded in prior years as revenue. It would be recorded this year as a bad debt write-off, but that would not affect the amount of cash that's necessary for the JWSC to operate. So we could potentially be showing a loss because of those write-offs on a financial recording basis, but still be on solid ground as far as a cash needs basis, which is how the budget is prepared.
I love the concept. The only tweak I would make was, if we're gonna do it, I would just do it immediately, and that way we're not, I mean, it seems like it'd be simpler for staff too, to have to keep up with it, and okay, we'll draw the line, and if you do this for 6 months, we're gonna waive it. If we just went ahead and just said, look, this is your actual water consumption, we figured it out, and we're gonna put that piece on payment plan. You gotta stay current. Starting right now, you gotta stay current with today's consumption and 1/24th or 1/36 or 1/12 or whatever it is, depending on the thing going forth, and as long as you're current, we're not gonna assess late fees, and the two
So
reasons.
what are you gonna do if they don't meet their plan?
Then that's when we have a new cutoff policy, which is, I mean, ultimately, at some point, we're gonna have.
Well, I mean, that's an eventuality that we've got to work into it.
But I think part of the reason people can't make their plan is because they're paying at least 50% in a lot of examples, maybe not in every single example, but a lot of these examples, it's paying at least 50. I mean, I think you and I did it one day, just back when we originally started this, just did it conceptually to see what the numbers look like. And I mean, some of these people are paying $100 a month in interest. Now, I understand that's gonna stop immediately, but some of that, I mean, another 100 was in back interest. Some of these people were paying $250 a month
Well,
in interest.
how have we addressed, we said 6 months, okay, but let's say that they go 6 months and then they start again not paying their current bill and everything. What is the eventuality of somebody that can't keep paying?
I mean, if they go 6 months and then month 7, they don't pay their bill, they would have had the accrued late fees taken off their bill. And they don't pay their bill, their water would get cut off, and we're gonna have to get to the point where we
So we
don't,
would have a very, very strict cutoff policy
so they
for
don't have
turning
this
the water
happen
off.
again. These balances don't accrue again, is basically the point. So as part of this also, we need to set a date, maybe at the end of this calendar year, not the fiscal year, where we don't offer any more new payment plans, because you shouldn't be getting a high balance anymore without getting your water cut off. So it would be, it's a good faith effort on both parts, both the customer and the JWSC's part, to help each other out. and then we stop the payment plans, say January 1, so that we don't keep digging a bigger hole for ourselves.
I think it puts us back on even ground too. I think since we helped create this issue by allowing people to build up so much, high bills, that once we decide to forego their late fees and all that, it puts them, well, either you pay your bill now or you can't. Then your water get cut off. But you don't have to worry about paying those late fees. So it means that we're not gonna carry you anymore. But we gotta put them at an even ground before we say we're not gonna carry you anymore. That's what I think.
Well,
I think that's what
Our
this does.
carrying
I hope
cost,
that it goes that way, but.
Well, it may and it may not. It may and it may not.
To the water's edge, which we have to get in.
Yeah, it may and it may
Find
not.
Some reason to keep letting them get water.
Well, no, you're right. Well, I don't think we can find any reason because, we have done all we can do, but we show good faith in that.
Agree with that.
So, and once we put them there, if they decide not, they can't, then we won't carry that along a bill like we did before. You're right, like Andrew said, there would be no reason to have a payment plan because we're not gonna let you get towards doing a payment plan anymore.
part of that challenge is that when we're carrying them, our carrying cost is much less than what their bill is reflecting, because it's been loaded down with payment fees.
Yes,
And it just gets bigger and
And
bigger
bigger
and
and
bigger.
bigger, right.
And we're not collecting, in a lot of cases, not collecting the money, it's just being carried on the income statement as revenue, even though it's uncollected revenue.
Exactly.
And it doesn't even reflect the actual cost
Exactly.
of service. And we're not banks, we're not in the banking business, we're
Well,
charging them
essentially,
18%.
Well, it takes it from being a penalty-type organization, like what you all said here about always trying to penalize them for something. It says now, if you don't do it, we're not gonna penalize you by charging you late fees. Your water will get cut off, and we just gonna be done with that part. Once we put you back on level ground to where you can pay your water, you pay your true water bill.
So how do we go to the next step with this? What do we need to do?
Two things on the next step, and real quick, before I answer that, Commissioner Stevens, if you are somebody that's been paying your payments already, and you've got 6 months come July 1, we can start that in July, but for people that haven't been up to date with their payment plans, that would start July 1. The other thing, as part, and we're gonna talk here in a minute about the rate resolution fees and stuff, as part of the vote for the new rate resolution where the rates don't change, but we have to vote in a new rate resolution because it only covers 1 year, we will put the language in there that says if you're on an active payment plan, late fees will not be charged. So that's literally the only thing we have to do from a governing body perspective to make this happen.
Late
That
fees
gives
will not
us-
be charged after you have made 6 payments.
No, it won't, just won't.
At all.
At all.
If you have an active payment plan, you will not be charged late fees because you've made arrangements to pay your debt off. If you don't have that arrangement, you will still be charged late fees.
So basically, if you got a $30 water bill and you say, you know what, I'm gonna write a $60 check next month instead of a $30 check.
You're gonna get the 1.5.
Right.
So I think,
I personally think that's a good idea. Like I said, the only tweak I'd make is do it immediately. I think what you proposed is well thought out, and I think it makes sense. And I think it's gonna be a huge relief effort to folks. And frankly, I think it's fair. I've always had heartburn with charging 18% interest to me, like we're entitled.
So the new rate resolution has to be completed by when?
July 1st.
June 30th.
And so we need this acted on in order to include in the new rate resolution.
so the next finance committee, we wanted to discuss it today, next finance committee, when we
For
talk
approval.
about the full rate resolution and things of that nature, it would be in there for approval. You won't necessarily approve this separately, it would just be approved as part of the rate resolution. So,
Okay, we ready to move on?
sure.
The new item 4, financial policies.
Okay, Commissioners, you have a copy of the financial policies, and that really hasn't changed from the copy that you received at the last meeting in April. As far as the policies themselves, what has changed is there are some additions in Appendix A, which are some of the policies applying to, I think, for computing and remote access, servers and that type of thing. Have been adding to this since last month. And the other part is that, and it's, it was suggested that we have more dedicated or more laid out procedures and actually have position titles as to who's responsible for various steps throughout a procedure, which relates back to process mapping that was included in the strategic business plan. So much like the flow charts that you saw for bill, for the payment plans and so on, we're mapping out these processes. And right, the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've been working very closely with Ms. Crosby on the flow charting for inventory control and putting together what we need for the financial controls from our perspective, what she's going to need for the physical controls and from her perspective, and getting those put together in a flow chart format. The work is continuing on that.
All right. If you don't mind,
Go ahead.
I think that the first portion of it, and you can do it in an appendix, but I think that you say here, I'll start off with page 2 of 19E, reporting, and you say periodic financial reports will be prepared and distributed to the director and department heads. These reports allow, and you have all that verbiage in there. You need to say what those, are those electronic reports? Or are you preparing?
Well, they're a combination of electronic and
Well, you need to say someplace what the reporting is and specify exactly what's in the report and what they're supposed to do with it.
we can certainly write that in, but conditions do change and we need to change formats
Well, this should be a
occasionally.
living document, not a fossil document on the bookcase.
I understand, but I'm wondering how often do we bring this back to the commission for adoption of changes that are in
Well,
this?
I think you can do it as is required. I think you lack a lot of specificity. I think that you need to specify what commission reports the commissioners are gonna get,
I can certainly do that.
okay? And I think you need to specify, I think another report that you need to develop that we're not seeing right now is what our operating costs for our sewer plants individually. So we know how much it costs in Southport to process sewer or deliver water if it's production. So that we know, what is the break-even point on things like how many customers we need that justifies doing something. I just think that lacks a lot of specificity. That's just me.
And I think some of the specificity is a little confusing, too. For example, budget transfers, the director is authorized to transfer 10%,
Up to $5,000.
but not more than $5,000 between code groups. And I think we've seen some bigger numbers than that moved around between code groups. I don't know if that's the total code group or between the department-related portion of that code group.
Actually, up until this year, we've never officially made any budget amendments. We made some when some of the personnel in billing were transferred from customer service or administration back to finance. We made some budget adjustments for that, but that's the only budget adjustment that's ever been made since we've been doing budgets. We've never submitted an actual budget amendment to the commission before, and the executive directors have never actually transferred budgets before.
I too thought it was vague in a lot of areas, but I kind of thought that was by design. I mean, just make it easier to operate.
Well, it is to some extent because actual practices and procedures sometimes will vary, but still stay within the policy adopted.
Well, I mean, I like it so that somebody can sit down and know how they're supposed to function. And that's what a policy's supposed to be, internal, because this is an internal policy. And I think you ought to specify what the reserves are and what they're supposed to be used for.
Well, I mean, I think under reporting, where we have the financial reports, I mean, there's a purpose for those financial reports.
Right.
And I would like to see somebody, if it's not happening, let's say the executive director, meeting at least on a quarterly basis with the department heads to review their actuals against their budgets and talk about where are we, where should we be, and what are we gonna do to get back on plan?
I agree, I mean, I agree with that, and I think that probably does happen, you know, but I don't know that I have a policy to say it happens. I mean, if I was executive director, I would want the flexibility to kind of run that piece of it how I wanted it. If I wanted to do it monthly with some department heads and quarterly with those bigger, smaller departments, I mean, I would like that flexibility.
And then
That's why I kind of thought it was left intentionally vague, I mean.
then you may not end up with that item H where you might be trying to move more than $5,000 between budget codes because nobody's been watching the ship
Well,
closely
I'm not
enough.
saying I wouldn't watch it, I'm just saying I would watch it the way I thought was best.
Why don't you go back and rewrite this thing so it's a little more specific?
Okay, so right now I've got, be more specific in reports and, reserves and uses of those reserves.
Well,
So
that's, I'll give you my notes out of here.
I was going to request of the committee to, if you have markups for this, provide those to me so that it can go through and do the necessary edits and
Okay.
look down at it and go through these.
Well, I don't mind coming
Write
in
up
and
new
sitting down
procedures.
with you, if it's okay.
That's fine. I'd like to see under reserve management, I mean, I would like to see the reserves actually detailed, what the reserves are, what the purpose of each reserve is, and what it should be.
I agree on the reserve, and the rest of it I don't, but I agree with it on reserve, but I mean, I'll go along with whatever y'all do.
Fund balance of available reserves equal to at least 180 days of operating expenditures. Well, the reserves, I mean, which reserve are you referring to as 100? Are you looking at all the summary of all of them together? Or a particular reserve? You don't have to answer that
Yeah,
question,
that-
but that's what I mean, specific detail
Yeah,
about that.
that particular one refers to available days days cash on hand, which is one of the measures that goes into our credit rating.
Yeah.
We have a
But do we have
reserve.
to have a, excuse me,
Go ahead. We have a reserve which is, we were at 6 months of
Yep.
operating cash, and we backed it down to 4 months.
but my question to you is this, does that have to, I mean, we have a couple of reserves, 3 reserves, I think, and that's one of them, but when they look at us, can't they look at all the reserves to see if we meet the criteria?
They look at all of the unrestricted reserves that are not legally restricted, being
Well,
the
is
capital tap
the
fees.
capital
The capital
reserve-
tap fees and the deposits have legal restrictions on them, as does any money that's held by the bond trustee.
Okay, that needs to be
Otherwise, the-
more fully explained.
Yeah, let's just meet outside of this committee and talk about it some more.
Okay.
We have a big,
And
there's a
as you
big
have-
start here.
As you have suggestions or edits and that type of thing,
Well,
please forward them on to me and we'll get them incorporated.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna be gone all of next week, but the week after, I'm free, and just send a meeting invite when you wanna get together and talk.
Okay.
We'll get that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a hard stop at 3.
Hard stop at 3. Let's go to the new item 5, rate resolution fees.
Yes, sir, this was just to update you, there's a copy of last year's rate resolution. Towards the back of the rate resolution, there's a list of fees, in Appendix A, that, we had a model from previous financial, provider that has those, how those are calculated. Over the next couple of weeks, we will be going through each one of those to verify the, validity of the calculation, and based off of how things have changed and how operationally we may be doing things differently, so maybe things are done in over shorter time periods, so we don't need to have the fee to cover 2 hours and they only cover 1 hour. So
Okay.
by the first week of June, we hope to have all these numbers updated, and provide that information to you.
To the finance committee, so then we can move it on to the
That is correct.
full commission.
Like the camera truck, would we, if we require in our, you know, that they camera the lines, would they be charged this fee?
If they are not currently charged that fee, we could cause them to charge that fee, but.
Well, I mean, I haven't really read through the whole thing, but I think that we ought to talk about development and fees that they can be subjects to. Because, while I believe in development and want to help, I just don't think the ratepayer ought to be paying it.
Absolutely. And like we brought up in the facilities meeting this morning, I think if we can convert that more to getting third-party CCTV
I think that's
inspection,
great.
I think that, A, frees our guys up to do more stuff, and B, the ratepayers aren't paying for it anymore.
Yeah. But at the same time, if he says, I can't get anybody,
If he can't get anybody, then he
he
can
can
pay
come
do
to
it.
us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Market rate. Andrew, on the BOD and total TSS per pound, are we gonna recalibrate those numbers based on the actual cost?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It'll be a blended between all three plants. So it's kind of
So you need us to review this document, provide feedback
Yes.
prior
Yeah.
to the June meeting or prior to June 1.
That would be the hope. If you have any feedback you'd like to see addressed, we are going to, even without your feedback, look at all these fees that are in here.
Okay. Another question, because I was looking at Appendix C. What are we now using for an REU? 300 or 250?
300 is what we're using for an REU still. That has not changed.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to future banking services RFPs. I think you put that one.
I did, you know, I know we talked about reserves, talked about our stuff several times, and, you know, it's just in the interest of trying to learn something about, you know, about this and learn kind of how big industries do it. I mean, I've got a small business that I own, and I get free checking, you know, so I mean, why doesn't a big business? And just trying to learn something about that, I reached out to someone who's pretty close to me, who's in the banking industry, and they said, hey, let me refer you to one of my colleagues who's in the banking industry. And I got to talking with them, and, you know, through conversation, I basically learned that they had bid, they're in this community, and had bid on the bank before. They were very complimentary of the process that y'all went through. They had lost both the business, but were very, very complimentary of the process that was gone through at the time. And, you know, and said, you know, what y'all did at the time made perfect sense. The selection you made, we couldn't have been any more competitive, blah, blah, blah. And then just doing more research and talking to more people and trying to really learn what big businesses do. You know, what I came to is the market's changed a lot since we did our last RFP. And, you know, the responses would likely look a lot different if we put something out on the street now. So I was want really to kind of learn what our timeline, what our plan was to put something out on the street to do a different banking RFP. But I believe it's been, what, 3 years since we did the last one, 4 years?
The last RFP was issued in October of 2014, and that was awarded to BB&T Bank. And
So 5 years,
So,
to that point,
and-
the market, I was thinking of 4, but 5 years,
and
the
that
market's
was-
changed a lot, and, you know, 4.5, I guess.
Yeah.
So what is our plan to put it back on the street
Well,
again?
that RFP was issued for the initial year of 2015 and 3 option years, which would be 16, 17, and 18. So actually, we would be overdue for going out to rebid on the banking services. However, we consciously did that, or consciously stayed with BB&T this year because we still have a number of things that we're in process or in mid-process or just about done with as far as implementing banking services that are necessary for customer service, such as getting the lockbox set up. We were in the middle of that. Getting the online payments through the web portal set up between Harris and BB&T Bank. That was a process that was still ongoing. Switching over the credit card services at the counters from our previous provider to BB&T, which saved us a significant amount of money. All of those things were kind of still not completed at that time. So rather than bring somebody else in to start all over again with those processes, we retained or didn't go out for bid last year. You know, the only thing we still have in process with them right now is implementation of the purchasing cards. So once that's done, I think we'll have probably most all of the banking services in place, which will give us the full range of services that we'd want to go out to bid for. And as you mentioned, Commissioner, banking has changed. Our need for banking has changed. We've added a lot of services since that initial bid. We did have a lockbox previously that was provided by a third party, but we've added the online payments, changed the banking or the payments out here, adding the purchasing cards. Of course, we've started the investment portfolios for the various reserves, and I think there's a couple of other services I'm missing. So there is a range of, our usage of the bank has expanded tremendously since it was originally bid.
So
In a nutshell, I mean, what my assessment, my learning from this is that 2014, what we did made a lot of sense. And really, I mean, and I didn't think that when I first started talking about this, although that didn't make sense to me. But after talking and learning and researching, it made a lot of sense. But it's no longer the best option for us. You know, what the contract terms we had in 14 are no longer good terms for us as a business. And I'd just like to see us go ahead and expedite putting something out, you know, whenever.
what's the time frame?
Okay,
is it on-
one of the things, though, that you got to remember is the transition cost. And there's opportunity cost and there's real cost, because of, you may have to get a rewrite on your software that we run the organization with. And that's gonna, so that, if we go out, when we ask bids, you got to put that opportunity cost and real cost of transition as part of the decision-making portion
Yes, sir.
of what you say is the best option for us.
Yes.
Yeah,
And we-
I mean, but that's easy to do.
I just don't want them to forget.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Y'all, I gotta run, I got a hard stop.
Take care, have a good day.
Y'all too.
And in our discussions, Mr. Burrows mentioned that one of the things that we need to include in this RFP is how well a new bank could work with Harris. Harris can be very difficult to work with, unfortunately. But that's one issue that we would have to address. And there is going to be a substantial transition time for this. It takes 4 to 6 months to get a lockbox set up and working and and tested to make sure that our customer payments can be applied correctly to their accounts and processed correctly. A lot of testing to that, and it may take some cost for changing the barcodes on the bottom of our bills and all of that kind of thing. But the actual implementation, I would expect, I'm just kind of guessing right now, but I think we need a minimum of 6 months just to make the transition from one bank to another.
And who knows, if we go back out for RFP, BB&T might win again because they brought back better terms this time, so
Yeah.
it may not have to
Yeah.
go through that implementation.
Well, the terms have changed in the
Right.
industry. That's
Right.
what we're hearing,
Yeah.
because it's been several years now, and we
And-
just need to rebid those terms. And they're gonna be competitive, I'm sure.
You know, last time, BB&T, United Community, SunTrust, and Ameris all bid. United Community Bank we can't provide the services that we require at this time. They don't
That's a
have the-
local.
They don't, well, they have a local bank, but it's more personal banking and small commercial than it is to provide the full range of services that we would require. And of course, BB&T and SunTrust have combined. So I'm not sure who Commissioner Stevens talked to, but if it's somebody from SunTrust, BB&T is going to be the same as SunTrust this time. So, but certainly we can get the RFP prepared and take into consideration those transition costs.
Okay, and so are you thinking in terms of a timeline on,
I would think we would need to have it, we would need to have the bid out and accepted, and we didn't need to accept the bid probably July at the latest. maybe into August.
Because we would have to do, if we were gonna change banks, we'd have to have that transition done prior to the next fiscal year starting, because that would make it much simpler to.
Well, in that case,
Pretty
then,
aggressive.
you have almost a year to do it in, because we're not gonna get that far along.
That's correct.
You know, the banking contract was actually a calendar year contract, that's
Okay.
why I was saying
If
July.
it's
but-
calendar year and
but
it
the,
fits
uh,
into our fiscal scheme of things, then maybe
but-
you could do it in the fall, but
With the option years, already expired, we technically don't have that contract under the original RFP.
I think we're probably beyond the scope of some of the things that were in the original RFP.
But if we taking the workload into account, though, the best time for us to be doing something like that would be late summer, early fall, before we go back into the budgeting process, starting in January and February of next year.
So we need to revisit this issue in late summer, I'd say, and get started at
Absolutely.
that time. Start defining how the banking industry terms have changed and what services may, and how our needs have changed and what services we may need to ask for. Item 7, the final item, financial statements, month end. Looking through the statements, we're on track. We've done a lot of financial analysis through the budgeting process, and it looks like we're looking at a position of roughly on track for 3.7 million to the good at the end of this fiscal year. Do we have any idea how much of that would be uncollected revenue that have at risk?
Are you talking about the amounts available to transfer to reserves?
Well, that would be the next question. I was curious how much of that is uncollected revenue. Is it $1 million?
Well, we would have to go back to the balance sheet to really determine that. As of April 30th, we had $2.6 million in our cash accounts, our general checking accounts, revenue accounts. So I would think some portion of that, I think easily $1 million could come out. It's our monthly expenses are about $2.2 million a month, $2.25 million a month on average. So we'd want to keep at least half a month of revenues in those accounts just to have the cash flow to meet our current expenses. But there should, if this continues to the end of the year, there should be some amount that would be available for transfer to reserves.
So it looks like, if I'm deciphering through those numbers, 3.7 to 2.2 to 1.1, keep 1.1, you're really looking at 1.5 million that may go into reserves?
Potentially, yes. There is a separation between what shows up as revenue, net revenues, and what's actually available in cash, because in our discussion about the inventory adjustment, if there's an inventory adjustment, that'll affect our net revenues, but it will not affect our cash position, because that cash has already been expended in prior periods. So the two they're connected, but there's not a direct correlation between the two.
Are there any issues we need to be aware of in the budget or in the actual?
First, we are under budget as far as the tower rentals. We expected T-Mobile to be on this year. We expected that last year too, but that has not materialized. We've actually lost a carrier on a couple of our towers, so that revenue is less than budgeted this year, and we've budgeted less for next year. Of course, we're going to, CBS has agreed to pay rent through the end of May, I believe, so we'll be $8,000 short in rental income this month, or this year. Of course, next year, we didn't budget any rental income from the building next door, or the area next door.
And they're moving out
They're,
When-
They've
they're in
already-
the process of moving out now,
right now, so it gets turned back over to us
May 31st.
May 31st, and what's our plan at that
We've
point?
had actually a couple of people call, so once they get their stuff out, we'll have some conversations and let them go through the building and see if they're actually interested or if they were just fishing, so.
Are we asking for any particular lease period?
We have not been yet. That'd be certainly something we would get the commission's, ideas on before we went forward.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, in other income of the, total to date of $2.885 million, above, there's a significant amount of late fees in that that have been charged on accounts. In some ways, that's actually, I hate to say it, false recording of revenue, but it's probably money that we're never going to receive from a lot of the customers that are being charged late fees because they simply can't afford to pay their bills as it is. So that, even though we record it as revenue, it's probably not going to be cash collections.
Can you do a pro forma balance sheet and income statement with the changes we're planning on cutoffs and removal of late fees for the next finance committee meeting?
We can get you an estimate. and
yeah,
it
we
won't be
can get
exact.
Just give us a number
Yeah,
of what,
get you an
We
estimate.
can
Yeah, we
get
need to
what it
look,
look
we
like.
need to see, this is what it is now, this is what it would be if we didn't do this, this is what it's gonna be
Sure.
when we do this.
Sure. We can get that to you.
yeah, I was curious.
I paused thinking about how I'm going to do it, and
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was asking was, when I was asking what the uncollectible revenue, how much are we talking about in that number?
If we go to the balance sheet, our total accounts receivable from customers at the beginning of this fiscal year was $2.1 million net of almost $2 million of reserve for bad debt. That's down to receivables of $1.9 million, but only $1 million of that being estimated as ultimately becoming bad debt. So the collection efforts have been quite successful in reducing those balances, and some part of it is actual write-off of debts that we will never collect because they're simply so old, and we have no information on those customers to refer to our collection agency for them to track it down.
But Commissioner Copeland, that's a pretty good estimate of what is that sort of uncollectible revenues would be.
The
that.
1.9?
No,
No,
the 1.0.
Oh, the 1.0. Okay. About $1 million. Anybody have any other questions? Any other business?
The only other thing I would point out, we had some questions earlier in the year about our overtime spending maybe being a little high. The overtime report, if you look at that, we have substantially curbed the overtime spending, and we are going to be considerably under budget in overtime this year due to changes made in both the way we run our shifts. We now have a second shift at Systems Pumping to catch these calls that are coming in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when people get home from work. We've changed the way we've done some of our staffing at the wastewater plants. And so that has certainly made an impact on those fees. And we've also made some changes to SCADA so they don't call out for every time the wind blows. So we've made some improvements there.
So this is as of April 30th, and you're looking at the difference between
Year to
from
date.
now until fiscal year end, 2 more months, 131,000.
And, you know, at the current rate, we'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 at the end of the year. And that was somewhat front-loaded this year, so we've made more changes as the years went along, so that number is actually, if you look at the monthly overtime, it's way down for the last 4 or 5 months.
Good. Anything else?
I don't have anything.
There being no further business to come before the Finance Committee, this meeting is closed.